Let's picture Britain during the Industrial Revolution. It's booming, it's chaotic, and get this, a full third of the entire population is under 15 years old. But for millions of these kids, there was no childhood. No school, no games, just work. Hard, dangerous work. Today, we're diving into that story. It's a story about exploitation, yeah, but it's also about the slow, painful fight to change everything and to redefine what it even means to be a child.
Just listen to these words for a second. This is from a real person, Robert North, a miner, talking to a government commission. This quote, it just cuts right through all the history and economics, doesn't it? It shows you exactly what was at stake. This wasn't some abstract problem. It was real, it was brutal, and it was happening to children every single day.
You see, child labor wasn't some niche issue. It was everywhere. It was part of the very engine that powered the nation. From the grimy city chimneys to the roaring factories to the pitch-black mines, kids were a huge part of the workforce. So what was it actually like for them? Let's take a look.
One of the first jobs to really horrify the public was that of the climbing boys. Chimney sweeps would basically buy these kids because they were small enough to cram into these narrow, twisting flues. It was terrifying, suffocating work. People actually started trying to pass laws about this way back in the 1780s, but honestly, with very little success.
And then you had the factories. I mean, just look at the scale of these places. Inside these massive textile mills, children, some as young as 9, were working 12, sometimes 16 hours a day. All the machinery was wide open, totally unguarded. If you got tired, if you just lost focus for a second, you could lose a finger, an arm, or even your life.
But if you think that was bad, the conditions deep underground in the coal mines were on another level of shocking. This quote comes from an official government report. It's describing young girls and women, often working stripped to the waist because of the heat, dragging these massive carts of coal through tiny, dark, wet tunnels, right alongside men who were often working completely naked. It was absolutely brutal, physically and morally.
4. Just 4 years old. That's how young some kids were when they started working in the mines. An 1842 report to Parliament found that some children were so young they were carried to the mines by their parents, still in their nightgowns, to start their shift. It sounds like something out of a nightmare, but it was real. It was documented. Okay, so things are incredibly bleak. But you just can't have this level of horror going on forever without people starting to notice. Slowly but surely, a few powerful voices started to sound the alarm and, the conscience of the country finally began to wake up.
Now, this call for change wasn't just one person yelling. It was a whole chorus of different voices. You had philanthropists like Jonas Conway, who fought for years for the chimney sweeps. You had famous writers, people like Charles Dickens, who could tell stories that grabbed the public's heart. And maybe most importantly, you had these official government reports that just laid out the cold, hard, devastating facts in the children's own words.
And this is where art becomes a weapon. Charles Dickens was an absolute master of this. He created a character, a little street sweeper named Joe, who was based on the real testimony of a child worker. And with lines like this, Dickens wasn't just telling a sad story. He was standing up and pointing a finger directly at the Queen, at Parliament, at everyone in power.
So with all this public pressure building, Parliament finally had to do something. But, and this is a really big but, actually passing laws to protect these kids turned out to be this incredibly slow, frustrating, and very, very long process.
I mean, just look at this timeline. We're talking about a fight that went on for almost 100 years. From the very first attempt to regulate chimney sweeping in 1788 to the first law that actually worked in 1875, a century. And this happened in every industry. A law would get passed, but it was full of loopholes, or it was weak, or people just plain ignored it.
Now, the 1833 Factory Act really felt like a huge breakthrough. For the very first time, a law was trying to set real age limits, regulate work hours, and even, get this, make schooling mandatory for working kids. On paper, it looked amazing, a total game changer. But the real question was, who was actually going to enforce it? And here's the catch. This is where the whole story of reform just hits a brick wall. Because, passing a law is one thing, but making sure people actually follow it, that's another thing entirely. And for decades, these new laws were really not much more than strongly worded suggestions.
You don't have to take my word for it. Look at this. It's part of a real factory inspector's report from 1836, just 3 years after that big new law was passed. And this inspector is furious. He found boys at one company who had worked from 6 in the morning on Friday straight through to 4 in the afternoon on Saturday. That's a 34-hour shift. The law was being completely and totally ignored.
And even when the factory owners did get caught, the penalties were a total joke. This is a list of prosecutions from 1862. You can see the fines are tiny, 1 or 2 pounds. For a massive profitable factory, that's nothing. It's chump change. And look at how many cases were just withdrawn on payment of costs. It was literally cheaper for owners to just break the law and pay the tiny fine than to actually follow the rules.
And the reason it was so easy to get away with all this, it comes down to one single, absolutely unbelievable number: 4. The government appointed just 4 inspectors to enforce the Factory Act of 1833. 4 men, to cover thousands of factories across all of Great Britain. It wasn't a real attempt at enforcement. It was basically a symbolic gesture. It was designed to fail.
So it became pretty clear that just passing more laws that nobody followed wasn't going to fix the problem. What really needed to change was something much bigger, much more fundamental. It was about how society itself thought about children and what their role in the world was supposed to be.
And this was the huge conflict at the heart of the whole era. On one side, you have this new romantic idea, pushed by poets like Wordsworth, that childhood is this pure, innocent, magical time that needs to be protected at all costs. But on the other side, you have the harsh economic reality that for a poor family to survive, they needed the wages their kids brought in. A child was literally seen as part of a man's productive power.
But in the end, maybe the most powerful arguments came from the workers themselves. This is what Isabel Hogg, a Scottish coal miner, said to the commissioners. It's so simple and so powerful. She is saying, look, we're not revolutionaries. We're loyal. We'll work. But we just object to being treated like animals. It's not the work they're against. It's the horse work. Wow.
So that whole struggle, the Victorian fight to protect children's bodies from being literally broken by factories and mines, that was a battle that took nearly 100 years to win. And it kind of leaves us with a pretty big question for today, doesn't it? In a world where most of those physical battles have been won, at least here, how do we protect the idea of childhood itself? What are the new mines, the new factories of the 21st century?